Well, Pope Francis has been in the headlines today. He's apparently not feeling well, and it looks like he's about to be hospitalized with difficulty breathing. So, we're going to be taking a look at the astrology chart of Pope Francis to really get an understanding what could be going on karmically and see if this is something that we should be really concerned about. So, that's what I'm going to be looking at today. Those of you that are new to my channel, make sure you like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can get all of my updates and notifications. I do readings on celebrities, the royal family, and news events, monthly predictions, and even teaching videos. So make sure you're following my channel. All right, so let's take a look at Pope Francis, his chart. Okay, let's take a look at that. I'm pulling that up. Also, I want to give a quick disclaimer. This reading is for entertainment purposes only. This is my opinion on the astrological energies, and I'm just merely speculating as to what could happen based on the astrology chart. All right, so let's take a look at the chart. The first thing I like to look at when we're trying to assess what's going on with somebody karmically is actually not the transits. What I like to look at first is the Vimshatari Dasha system, which is very specific to Vedic astrology. If you're interested on what the Mahadashas are and so forth, check out my last video where I explain what Mahadashas are. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to note is that Pope Francis is in K2 Mahadasha, and he's going to be in this Mahadasha till October 13th, or sorry, October 14th of 2023. So by the end of this year. And he's actually in the last Bhukti of the Mahadasha, so Mercury. So he's in K2 Mercury, and it's the same date. So both of those are going to conclude October 14th, 2023. So that does give us quite a bit of information on what's going on. So, really, what we want to focus on is K2, and then we want to focus on Mercury and see what kind of karma is ripening with those situations. Let me clear up the chart. We also have to look at, when we're looking at K2, the ruler of K2, because Rahu and Ketu will take on the effects of their ruling planet, not just planets that cohabitate with them. So let's take a look. So K2 Mercury, just write it down so I can remember. So this K2 period, K2 periods can be difficult in general. So before we even look at the houses or anything, K2 typically represents things like loss. It can represent a loss of vitality. It has a an effect where we tend to lose our social material things. So there can be difficulty because what it's doing is trying to prepare us for spiritual things. Okay. So losses can include all types of things. So physical health. I also find it interesting that it's in the sign of Gemini and it's in the first house. The first house represents the body. Okay. So we have this sense of the loss of, we could say loss of health or difficulty there. And then also with the sign of Gemini, believe it or not, Gemini actually represents the lungs as far as body parts and astrological signs. So this really does, at least this confirms what's going on, the astrology chart. Let's go take a look at what else is happening with Mercury too. Okay, so K2 doesn't really look good. And remember, K2 is like when we complete some sort of karma. So, for example, if you were completing some sort of karma with the current incarnation, K2 can be a planet where your incarnation might be completed because K2 is like the karmic finisher planet in a lot of ways. So let's take a look at Mercury. Okay, and also let's keep in mind that Mercury is also the ruling planet of K2 because K2 is in the sign of Gemini. So we really have to look at Mercury, and it's kind of a double whammy because it rules K2, and then we're in a Mercury Bhukti at the same time. So Mercury is in the seventh house. You'll notice it's with a lot of other planets. So it's associating with a lot of planets. Rahu already shows that a real malefic effect there. Of course, we got Sun, third lord. We got Jupiter there, the 10th and 7th lord. So there's a lot of leadership karma that's happening right now. But I also want to point out that the seventh house, when we're looking at houses that represent the end of an incarnation, I wanted to just explain that to y'all for a quick minute here. So when you come to an end of an incarnation, it's typically going to happen during a period of the seventh house being activated or the second house being activated. Now, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule, but generally you're in a bhukti or a mahadasha of either the second lord or the seventh lord. And these are known as Maraka houses, just so you guys are aware. Maraka houses. Okay. So if you're approaching the end of an incarnation, and let's say your health is already kind of declining, it is a little bit of a danger zone. Okay. To be in a period of either the second lord or the seventh lord. Okay. And what we notice in Pope Francis's chart is that Mercury's in the seventh house. Okay, so that's a little bit difficult, and it's associating with the seventh lord. Okay, so that's a little bit of difficulty, and also we got this effect of K2 already represents losses. Okay, so there is some difficulty being shown by the chart. And we could expect that, this situation, there could be some difficulty all the way up until October of 2023. Okay. Now, I also want to give you the other interpretation of this. Obviously, this can represent ill health. Okay. But K2 can also represent retirement as well. So I don't want to leave that out. Like, for example, if you retired due to health reasons or something like that, K2 can definitely do that because K2 is the planet of I surrender. So that's something to be aware of. Now, I also wanted to show you, and I forgot about this earlier, K2, if we look at the moon chart over here, so I want to get your attention over here to the moon chart, you'll notice that K2 is in the sixth house. Okay, K2 is in the sixth house. And remember, especially when you're over the age of 50, your moon chart starts to become, a lot more pronounced in your chart or in your life. So even though your D1 chart is always going to be active and your Navamsa chart's always going to be active, K2 being in the sixth house here in the moon chart, well, you might remember the sixth house does represent things like illness, disease, conflict. So this looks pretty difficult. I would be very concerned about Pope Francis at this moment, especially when we're talking about until October. So until October 14th, that's a lot of difficulty indicated. Okay. And even with the beginning of Venus, there's a little bit of difficulty indicated there as well, because I mean, look, Venus is in the eighth house and it rules the 12th house. Okay. So I do see some difficulty happening. But I find it interesting that he's at an end of the K2 Mahadasha. And a lot of times when people are at the very end of a K2 Mahadasha, that's usually when the final like surrender happens. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be a physical, end of the incarnation, but it could also be something like a retirement. But I see a lot of difficulty. Okay. And I don't see that there being a lot of improvement with this. This is not meant to be a health diagnosis, but I do see some troublesome transits in the astrology chart that we surely have to pay attention to. So those of you that are concerned, we should be saying some prayers and sending some good intentions over to Pope Francis. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think down below. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.